for us as a junior oil and gas company, it is a extraordinarily large resource to have. 1.2 trillion cubic feet of gas, as you say, that's the equivalent of 200 million barrels of oil. We're 60% of that, so 120 million barrels of oil equivalent. Has fantastic potential for value realisation as you take it forward. So for us, it is a core focus project and one that we're excited to be moving forward with.
Hello, you're watching Proactive. Joining me in the studio today, Andy Butler, CEO of Sunda Energy. Andy, great to have you back in the studio. We're talking about your Chuditch operation in Timor-Leste today. Before we get into that though, could you give us a quick overview of the company and where it's going?
Yeah, thanks Stephen, great to be here. So yes, Sunda Energy, we're an AIM-listed company. We are focused on gas projects in the Asia-Pacific region. So we have three pillars to that. The Chuditch project that we'll discuss here today. We have an exploration project in the Philippines, which is a sort of a large resources for to be found out there, and we recently announced the acquisition of an oil and gas portfolio of production assets with some upside in New Zealand. But the binding theme across there is growth in gas in the Asia Pacific markets, which are high demand, high growth. It's the growth centre for gas projects sort of globally, and in a region where there's a strong government alignment and a strong focus, which has not been lost out there, on energy security.
Well, let's look deeper at Chuditch. It's a major national resource, 1.2 trillion cubic feet of mid-case gas. What makes the asset so strategically important, both to Sunda but also to Timor-Leste?
Yes, certainly. Well, I mean, we've been working on Chuditch for some time, as you know. It's a core project and a core project for Timor-Leste. So I'll answer that second part of the question first. I mean, Timor-Leste is a really interesting country. It's a young country. It's only about 25 years since independence. In that period of time, it's had one single gas field which stopped production last year, which has provided more than 80% of the GDP for the country. So they are very, very focused on and require these resource projects to move forward. Now, Chuditch is a discovered resource. It was discovered in the late 90s by Shell, and it's in shallow water and relatively easy to develop. I'll maybe tell you a bit about that shortly. But ultimately, for a country that presently hasn't really got any material revenues coming from resources, it's got another great project offshore called Greater Sunrise that it will look to develop. But ours is a simple field to develop. The revenues that should come from this field ultimately would, at the sort of prices that one would expect for a liquefied natural gas project, what this would be, are in the order of $8 to $10 billion. So, you know, for a small developing nation, it is a very, very material part of their resource base. For us as a junior oil and gas company, it is a extraordinarily large resource to have. 1.2 trillion cubic feet of gas, as you say, that's the equivalent of 200 million barrels of oil. We're 60% of that, so 120 million barrels of oil equivalent. Has fantastic potential for value realisation as you take it forward. So for us, it is a core focus project and one that we're excited to be moving forward with.
You recently signed an LOI with Sunda Energy to secure a drilling rig for Chuditch 2.
Yep.
How does this joint campaign reduce costs and execution risk, Andy?
Sure. I mean, this is a really important approach. That sort of collaborative approach happens a lot in this business. You know, projects length, life cycles are long, costs can be high, but also just accessing equipment is challenging. You know, at moments like this, there's a lot of demand for drilling rigs. We're in a relatively remote location for rigs that would come from elsewhere in Southeast Asia, so mobilization costs are high. Just availability is often very challenging. So working collaboratively with another operator, in this case Sunda Energy, that have a couple of fields that they're looking to develop, means that we have a combined roughly 200 days of operating time. It makes big contracts for a rig operator and makes certainty around that. Other synergies they are manifold. It is not just a drilling rig. There's lots of equipment that would be shared across campaigns. There's project management aspects. There's logistical aspects, all of which can be kind of planned together, which make them more cost effective. You share the costs, particularly mobilization costs, but across the board. And again, it means you can just be more efficient in a lot of that planning. So it's a very proactive thing to do. It's a very sensible approach to do. And it's a great example of junior companies, relatively junior companies, working hard to make sure that they can expedite projects like this for shared interests, but also for the mutual benefit of the state itself.
Andy, how are negotiations with rig providers progressing? What do you see as the next steps towards drilling?
So we are well advanced in our preparations. We had planned to drill earlier. We had a sort of involuntary postponement, but so an awful lot of work had been done in terms of the preparation, and I'll come back to that. Your question around rig negotiations, and as is publicly stated by Finder, they're working towards a final investment decision on the fields that they're looking to develop by the middle of this year, so in a few months' time. They've made further announcements on that this week, so I won't speak for them, but I'd say that, as part of that FID process, they're obviously lining up the rig contracts, so they are making very good progress with respect to lining up a rig, and we're liaising closely with them on it. Next steps towards the drilling campaign is absolutely that. So we have asked for we require an extension to the current phase of the PSC. That's going through the process with the government authorities at the moment. Rig contracting we'd expect to follow fairly quickly, and then we're looking forward to a drilling campaign next year. And we'll be making announcements as you go towards that. But it's worth remembering that we have made a lot of preparatory steps getting to this point. We announced a month or so ago having all our environmental permits in place, which is a major piece of work to make sure that we've covered off on all environmental aspects. We've conducted a lot of survey work previously, site surveys at the location, environmental surveys at the location, a lot of engineering design work, etc. So we are in a state of pretty advanced readiness, and so we'll be kind of flowing into that campaign as the rig contract comes together.
How does the development fit into your strategy of building a scalable gas business in a region of rising demand, Andy?
Well, I talked about a little bit about the scale of the resource, but it's also worth talking about the potential for this to flow significant amounts of gas. So our expectation is that this field can produce gas at about 300 million cubic feet today. That's about 50,000 barrels of oil equivalent today, which is a very significant amount of production. And we have confidence around that because of the way that the field that recently stopped produced for 20 years at very high rates. And other fields in Australian waters, one called Barossa, for example, which has demonstrated exceptionally good flow rates from exactly the same reservoirs. So we have a very, very high technical confidence in the ability of these fields to produce at very high levels for long periods of time. And so, what we're doing is helping Timor-Leste advance this project as a very material gas producing asset, which would then be tied into infrastructure that they're developing and working on. And so it really is the core of that concept of delivering gas resources in a region. Now, Timor-Leste, as I said earlier, it's a small country. Domestic markets are not particularly great in terms of scale, but there is some market there. But it's principally an export project for gas resources elsewhere in the region. And a lot of gas in this Southeast Asian region has come from the Middle East, and so there's an even greater awareness at the moment within the Greater Asia Pacific Basin of the requirement for resources that are coming from closer to home, and Timor-Leste fits that bill, and Chuditch is an important part of that jigsaw.
Well, I hope you'll continue to keep us updated with progress at Chuditch and across your other operations, Andy.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks very much. Andy Butler, the CEO of Sunda Energy.